The United Kingdom, the home of Boris Johnson, racists, and apparently Formula One. The famous Silverstone circuit would play host to the 11th round of the 2023 season, as 10 teams, 20 drivers, and all of those who bought tickets before the prices skyrocketed to the moon geared up for another dramatic weekend of Max Verstappen domination. Hey there guys, I'm Will, welcome to FP1 and the comedy review, the race review which I can almost guarantee will be out before anyone else is in the content creation space, given this is the weekend where they're probably drunk in a tent somewhere. As usual, we've got a lot to talk about this time round, but I'm still going to pad the watch time by begging you to like and subscribe even though we're barely a minute into the video. So make sure you do that. Now let's get into the comedy review. It's the British Grand Prix. Let's kick things off with the news, and oh boy, there's a lot to go over this time round. First things first, let's go back to Austria, where after the race, one of the stewards managed to fall asleep on the penalty button. Aston Martin would lodge a complaint following the Grand Prix, severely pissing off Otmar Safnauer, who tried to sue the team for stealing his trademark tactics. Hours would go by until the FIA revealed a whole host of penalties which dramatically shook up the finishing order. That said, Max Verstappen still finished first. I'll be honest, by this point I'd lost interest in the Austrian Grand Prix, so I didn't look into it much further. However, it should be noted that Esteban Ocon somehow managed to rack up 30 seconds worth of penalties, leaving us all to wonder what circuit he was actually driving around last Sunday. My review on the race was up too early to take all these changes into account, yet it didn't stop the comment section ripping me a new one for not having a fucking time machine to hand. My lesson from it all? I just can't win. Moving on. Also in the news this week was Brad Pitt's new Formula One film. As reported earlier in the year, his film crew would be sending a modified F2 chassis around Silverstone to pick up footage for the film. And as this was revealed to the public, we all became rather confused. For starters, the paint job rather resembles that of a certain energy drinks company that catfished the Haas Formula One team back in 2019. And on top of that, their choice of race numbers hinted at F1 returns for Kimi Räikkönen and Nikita Mazepin. Well, for both Mazepin and Rich Energy, isn't it apt that their Formula One returns are all rooted in the world of fiction? Formula One would announce a 24-race calendar for the 2024 season, claiming it has a greener, more regionalised structure. They've also put Canada in between Monaco and Spain. And finally, Yuki Tsunoda has admitted that AlphaTauri's upgrades don't seem to be working, and quite frankly, I've got to agree. Replacing Gasly with De Vries was a horrible idea. And with that, on to practice. There would also be some new liveries doing the rounds at Silverstone this weekend. Williams teasing a historic look for their 800th Grand Prix, they're not doing that, and McLaren teasing a return to the chrome paint job. They're not doing that either. Both teams at least look set to make an impression at their home Grand Prix. Especially Williams, who finished so high up the order, I started to wonder if their historic paint job was actually just underneath. When Logan Sargent finished P5 at the end of FP2, I was convinced the team must have been cheating. Then quali rolled around and we were back to relative normality. Considering the rest of the field, Sergio Perez came across a bin bag in FP1. Though good luck working out which is which. His teammate Max Verstappen was as usual in fine form at the top, finishing P1 at the end of Friday despite moaning about his Red Bull setup. That sure fills us with confidence for the rest of the weekend now, doesn't it? The Flying Dutchman wouldn't make it a practice clean sweep, however, as the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc would take top spot come the end of Saturday morning's FP3 session. His ex-boss Mattia Binotto was back in the paddock this weekend, Charles doing a spinala in his honour at the end of the hour. FP3 would also see Norris investigated for leaving a butt plug in the rear of his McLaren. I'm sorry. Qualifying would start in the wet, though drivers still attempted to set times on the soft tyre in a bid to make it through. One man the crowds were definitely behind at Silverstone was Lewis Hamilton. The 7-time champion is often criticised for not engaging as much with the fans compared to his fellow drivers, though #Bless would prove all those wrong when he gave those at Stowe a special close-up look at his W14. That spin would put him in the danger zone with more rain falling onto the circuit, but when Kevin Magnussen's Haas decided it was bedtime at the Vale chicane, well, you know what's coming. McLaren, Mercedes and Alpine have all brought new front wings to the British Grand Prix. Apparently Max Verstappen felt a little left out and so made his own modifications during that red flag break. Despite there still being rain in the air, the track was still seeing massive improvement, and everyone was going out and going purple in the closing moments of Q1. The shock loss from that session was none other than Red Bull's Sergio Perez, though I'm starting to wonder whether it's really a shock these days, given the Mexican has now missed the last 5 top 10 shootouts in arguably the most dominant car in F1 history. At least his seat is still safe according to Helmut Marko. He still performs in the races, unlike Nick de Vries. I can't actually believe he said this. Only 14 cars would take part in Q2, after Valtteri Bottas' Alfa Romeo was so surprised at making it through the first session, it had a heart attack and died on the side of the road. All eyes were on Williams here though, the team aiming to get both cars into Q3 until Logan Sargent remembered that he was Logan Sargent. The American would join Stroll, Hülkenberg and Ocon in the drop zone. The Frenchman going back to his Austria tactics because that didn't go at all wrong there, did it? Anyway, that just leaves us with Q3, and the British crowd were in uproar as Lando Norris somehow got his McLaren into provisional pole in the dying seconds, before calming down upon realising that Max Verstappen hadn't finished his lap yet. Still, P2 and P3 for the McLaren team is a mega showing going into Sunday. Here's hoping that Lando just doesn't run into the hashtag blessed missile this time round. And with that out of the way, I would get into a sponsor segment. But since I don't have one this week, if you're enjoying the video, just fuel my fragile ego for a second and drop the channel a sub if you haven't already. Done? Let's get into the race then. Valtteri Bottas found himself demoted to the back of the grid before the race had even begun. Luckily, this is pretty comfortable territory for him nowadays though. For everyone else, the lights would go out and Max Verstappen would have a bad start. Lando Norris would jump the Red Bull with Piastri almost squeezing through as well. The fun would actually last a whole 5 laps until Verstappen got DRS and turned on the afterburners down the hangar straight. It was nice while it lasted, I guess. In the other Red Bull, Checo Perez was busy playing around with the Haas cars. He would get past Hülkenberg for 13th, taking his front wing end plate as a souvenir. Could always be worse though. You could be Esteban Ocon, who was retired from the session as a precaution after asking his engineers if he was allowed to straight line Maggots and Beckett's. At this point, we got reports of rain approaching the circuit, but in typical race day fashion, it just missed the track. Didn't stop Max Verstappen from complaining about the weather though. Red Bull may be master engineers, though I'm not sure what they can do about the wind right now. One driver I was expecting to be complaining was Lewis Hamilton. He had been stuck behind the Ferrari of Sainz and was struggling to make any inroads into the Spaniard. Yet his radio comms were unusually silent. Maybe part of the Mercedes Silverstone upgrade was a ball gag after what happened in Austria. You can probably tell there's a bit of filler content going on at the moment, and that's because in all honesty there wasn't a lot going on circuit. Few cars were making their pit stops, and Ferrari didn't know what strategy they were on, but neither of those things are particularly out of the ordinary these days in Formula 1. Things would all change on lap 33. Kevin Magnussen's Haas killed itself for a second day in a row, and the safety car was brought out. This brought the leaders into the pits, though the big gainer was Lewis Hamilton, who jumped himself up into the podium places. The safety car seemed to last forever, though when it came in, Verstappen caught Norris lacking and threw him into the clutches of hashtag blessed behind. McLaren, for some reason, put hard tyres on their cars, in contrast to the softs that everyone else seemed to be running. This gave us some phenomenal racing between Norris and Hamilton. Very brave driving from both of them, especially Norris, given what happens when Lewis tries to overtake at Copse. Norris held on, but the same could not be said for Carlos Sainz and Ferrari. He was dropping like a stone and under pressure from Pierre Gasly. Lance Stroll would come to his rescue by executing the Frenchman at the final corner. All this was aiding Verstappen, who soared off into the distance and ended up coming across the line on lap 52 to secure yet another race victory. But at least those battles behind kept us entertained. Overall, this was a pretty decent race. It was nice to see McLaren up there, and since they didn't win, I can remain smug that Daniel Ricciardo still holds their last Grand Prix victory. What did you guys think though? Let me know down in the comments, and while you're down there, be sure to drop this video a like and get subscribed for more comedy reviews in the future. A huge thank you to all my patrons and channel members for all of your support, and if you'd like to get involved with any of that, then you can head over to the links in the description. I'll be back with another video very soon, but until then, have a good one.